Ready to get started. So hello and thank you for joining us. Today's seminar is in collaboration with the Wu Tsai Institute Student Postdoc Committee at Yale. And before we get started, I wanted to point out that automatic closed captioning is available. You can access this by pressing the three dots in the bottom right corner of your screen. If you experience any issues accessing the captions or interpreters, please send me a message in the chat and we will, or sorry, actually the captions, please send me a message in the chat. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Piscataway lands. We're all joining this event from places around the world. And so I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the lands you're joining us from, as well as your relationship to those lands and to the indigenous peoples who have and continue to inhabit them. So my name is Caitlin, and I'm one of the Black and Neuro Seminar Series organizers. I'm happy to welcome everyone to our seminar series, both online and in person. Today we have Chelesa Fearce, who graduated Phi Beta Kappa and magna cum laude from Spelman College in 2017, where she majored in biochemistry and minored in philosophy. Upon graduating, she spent 2 years at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, where she studied dopamine receptor signaling in the lab of Dr. David Sibley. She is currently a student in the MD-PhD program at Yale University and is interested in drug development for psychiatric disorders. Most notably, Chelesa has been featured on several news outlets, including the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, BET, and the Huffington Post. Despite being homeless throughout her childhood, she graduated valedictorian of her high school class and was awarded a full scholarship to college and subsequently Yale School of Medicine. So just some logistics before we get started. We will have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end, and you can ask questions in the chat. And for those of you in person, there will be a microphone that you could use. Go ahead, and I'd like to formally introduce Chelesa. Go ahead and get started.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Okay. Hopefully you guys can hear me. So hi, everyone. I want to thank you first, Dr. Winston Gray and Dr. Kelly, for even inviting me to come speak. I was like, okay, wow. Thank you so much. And I want to let you know that this is going to be a very unconventional talk about science. Most of it is about my journey to actually study medicine and neuroscience. Because whenever I see people doing like immunology, HIV, ecology, I'm like, what makes people do this stuff? Because science is hard. Research in general is hard. So I'm like, what brought them to this? So I hope to convey to you all what brought me to actually doing drug design for neurological disorders. Okay. Oh, great. So I was born in Columbus, Mississippi. I was originally born there, but I grew up in various parts of Georgia. And I grew up in this small town. Like, I don't know if I know. Right. Wait, should I point it at the screen or?
Yeah, just press it for a second.
Uh-huh. Maybe it's me. Okay, it's fine. But I was born here in Columbus, Mississippi. And I went to this school, Caledonia Elementary School, for 4th and 5th grades. Now, at the time, I would go back and forth between Georgia and Mississippi because my mother was in in Georgia, but my grandparents were in Mississippi. And I spent 4th grade there. Now, you might be wondering, why do you have a Pokemon, my grandparents, and Aaliyah here? And I will tell you. So this was in 4th grade. I was at a summer at my grandparents' house. And this is my grandmother here, who's still alive and kicking. And I'm hoping that she can make it to my graduation virtually. But I remember being at home and I was playing on my cousin's Nintendo DS. It was a Pokemon game, and it's Charizard because I'm a Leo and my last name is Fearce. And I was like, a fire Pokemon is perfect for me. But anywho, Aaliyah's I Miss You came on the radio. And at that time, this was maybe 2 or 3 years after her death. So it was still sort of fresh and sort of new. And I just remember just crying my eyes out. And the reason I was doing that is because a few days before, my mother visited and she was talking to my upcoming teacher for the school year. And I overheard her saying that she had cancer. So at the time, I was like, okay, my mother's going to die. And this is the reason why I'm spending so many of my formative years in Mississippi with my grandparents versus my mother. And spoiler alert, she did not die. She is alive and well. But she did, unfortunately, undergo, like she was in remission, and then unfortunately she's still dealing with the cancer again today. But hopefully she will be a soldier like she was last time and get back to herself. So yeah, I remember thinking I would lose my mother. Now, more with Cheetos, schizophrenia, and again, my grandmothers. So this is my grandparents on my mother's side of the family with my sister at her graduation. What I have here is basically a representation of why I became interested in psychiatry and medicine in general. So when I was staying with my grandparents at the time, my aunt also stayed with us. She's a few years younger than my sister, or sorry, younger than my mother. And she would throw these temper tantrums. Like she would kick the wall. She would have arguments with my grandparents. She would say she's hearing voices and she would change her number all the time so we really could not reach her. And she was the person who would like sort of help get me to and from school. Then I later came on to realize that she has schizophrenia. Um, the reason these Cheetos are here is because I left my maternal grandparents and went to my paternal grandparents' house. And there I went to a new school for 6th grade. And this woman was there, a little, I guess, girl at the time. My name's Chelesa, but people always think my name's Chelsea when they first read it. And she saw me eating some Cheetos at one point. So Cheetos became my nickname from middle school all the way to high school. So that's my nickname. But anywho, when I was staying with my uncle, with my grandparents, I had an uncle on my father's side. He was my dad's brother. And he was the person who picked me up from school, brought me back. He took me to the store. He listened to me during my ramblings, whatever age I was, 10, 11. I was a little kid. I don't know. But he was a very calm man, very just not much of a personality. And I realized later on that he also had schizophrenia. So my mom's sister and my dad's brother both had schizophrenia. The difference between those two was that my aunt, she didn't take her medications, but my uncle did. My aunt, unfortunately, one of the side effects of many psychiatric medications is weight gain, along with some other very difficult side effects. So she's a woman. She didn't like gaining weight, so she stopped taking her medication. And unfortunately, she still does not take medication today, and she still have problems. But hopefully, in the future, I'll create more drugs for this. And my uncle was the opposite. He took his medications, but those medications had the side effects of causing him to have a blunt effect, and his personality just sort of waned out. So he wasn't really a person who was like an entertaining person. He's just a flat person, unfortunately. So again, I want to go into drug design so that I can make drugs that do not have the side effects of weight gain and then also those side effects of a blunt effect. So that was around in 6th grade. Mississippi, unfortunately, has some of the worst education outcomes in the country. So sort of in the middle of my first semester in 6th grade, my mother brought me back to Georgia to be with her. Now, this is a place called Hope Shelter. This was not how it looked when I lived there. It was in another building, but we ended up being in this place called Hope Shelter. And it was a transitional home. We didn't really want to call it a shelter because it's a place for people who are experiencing a transition in their life. And this could be like an emergency thing, or it can be a place where you stay there for long term. And we ended up staying there long term from about the time I was in 6th grade up to my freshman year of high school. And I went there and I started going to this school, Forest Park Middle. And the school bus is here because we would take the school bus from that school, from the shelter. And the kids would always say, "You guys live in a foster home," my sister and I. And it didn't really bother me, but I could tell that it really, really affected my sister. And she would try to like hide when she was getting on the bus. She was a teenager. I didn't really care, but she really cared. And so it really affected her that we were living in this place. And we stayed living there off and on for a few years. My freshman year, I went to a school called Charles R. Drew High School. Now, this school was a brand spanking new school when I went. It's only ninth and 10th grades. And there was this pre-freshman summer academy. And at that academy, it was like 2 weeks before school start. I remember saying, "I'm going to be valedictorian." And at the time, my life was still like a mess, like back at home, but I was like, I'm going to be valedictorian. And I just took that and I went forward with it. And I wanted to stop here to say that representation is so, so important. The only reason why I went into chemistry in the first place is because my sophomore year of high school, my teacher was a Black woman. And I remember thinking, I'm gonna hate chemistry. You just hear all these horror stories about chemistry, but I was gonna fail. I was like, this is gonna be the class that I get a B in, I won't be valedictorian, whatever. But I ended up really, really loving it. And I think that I loved it because I had a woman who I saw in me, or I saw myself in her. Dr. Deborah, I don't even think she knows. I say this about her all the time, but I love her and I miss her. And she's the reason why I chose to do chemistry. And then from there, we eventually moved out of the Hope Shelter, started moving in this apartment, lived in this apartment building in Kensington Manor. This was also sort of like my freshman, sophomore years. These are also sort of a tumultuous time because I would have to go from where I lived in Clayton County to school 30 to 45 minutes away. And at the time in Georgia, there's this law that if a student is homeless, they can attend school anywhere they want to. And it makes sense because, you know, you don't really have an address. I couldn't even get an ID because I didn't have an address and show like an email. And so I stayed at my school in Clayton County while living in DeKalb County. So I had to take like a train and a bus just to get to school, but I still did it because I wanted to graduate from that school. We stayed there for a few years, and it was a publicly funded program, and that program sort of lost funding, and unfortunately, we had to move out. So we moved to a new place, and that place was the Gateway Center. The Gateway Center is probably what you think of when you really think of a shelter. You think that's where you think of a shelter. The top floors were for men, and then the bottom floor was for women and children. So I remember the first night that we got there, my family and I. My mother got there at the time around 6 o'clock when intake was just ending. So we did our intake, we sat down and we ate some chili. But then around 8:30 p.m., there was this intercom saying the lights are about to go out. And so 8:30 rolls around, they start pulling out some, I guess, trays or carts with mats on them. And everyone took a mat, and we all took the mat and we put it on the floor for us to sleep in, and the lights went out at 9 p.m. So that was my first night. And unfortunately, I didn't get much sleep. Who could? At that time, there was a room full of kids, probably like 4 times the size of this room, women and kids. There's babies crying, people's talking because it's 9 o'clock. No one's really going to sleep at 9. And I remember not going to sleep because I was like, I just didn't get any sleep. So the next day I woke up, my sister and I, since we had gotten there so late, we went to the storage unit where my mom had us keeping our clothes and our things when we had moved out of the previous apartment. We sort of had always kept a storage unit because we were continuously in transition, moving back and forth between places. And I remember going to this U-Haul storage place, and my mother, well, I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I remember going there and then riding the bus home. And when I was riding the bus home, I heard this man next to me saying someone smells like urine. And I knew they were talking about me. It's something that always stuck with me. It isn't bad. It doesn't make me upset, but I was like, wow, they're probably talking about me. And that was because in that shelter, you had to sign up to take a shower at a specific time. And since we got there late, we weren't able to take showers. And so I hadn't taken a shower, and I had sort of the clothes I had on for 2 days. And I was just going to get new clothes. And I remember that night I took a shower, and it was a shower sort of like this, but it is multiple heads. And we were sharing the shower with multiple different people, or women, just women and children. And I remember it being a very humbling experience. And I also remember that night, for some reason, I forgot that we needed lotion. We didn't have any lotion. So the lotion, I just remember my skin being cracked and burning, and it was just so chapped. And I was like, I need to find some lotion. Like, you just never know how important these small things are, but lotion is really important. Like, I don't like my skin being dry. And I just remember taking that shower and having that dry skin at that moment. And yeah. So we went forward. Now, the time when I was staying in the Gateway Center, I was starting my junior year of high school. Now, I did something called dual enrollment. You guys are probably familiar with it. I spent my junior and senior years at a college, Clayton State University. I didn't take any colleges at my high school, One, because it was far away, and Clayton State was still far away, but also I just wanted to make sure again that I was going to be valedictorian. So I took classes at Clayton State University. And again, that time I'd have to take a few other buses and transportation to actually get to school. And I remember being there and I would be there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, depending on when I had my classes. And I would stay there all day because that was the only place I could do my homework when I had access to a computer. So I stayed there all day to do my homework. When I came home, it was 9 p.m. And of course the lights were out. And I remember having a test and I had to use sort of this flip phone. Back in the day, they had these flip phones, like called Obama phones you get if you didn't really have much money. And so I would use that to open my textbook and like read from my history book so that I could see, so I could pass my test. And so I just remember just doing that in that time. And I also remember at a public university, you don't get free lunch. And so the trade-off that I made was that I didn't really eat much on those days when I was at school because I made it home too late to get the shelter for food. And then I didn't really have much money to spend on campus food. So that was sort of a trying time. At the same time, my sister went to this school here called Carver High School in Atlanta. We sort of switched up because again, we could go to whichever school we wanted to go to. And my sister, she wanted to go to this one because she wanted to be closer and she didn't want people to know that we lived, unfortunately, in a home. So as time went on, the Gateway Center was not the best place for us. It was just a very difficult place to live in general. And so we ended up moving out and going into the Salvation Army, which also has a shelter component to it. With the Salvation Army, I think if I recall, my mother did pay a little bit of money to actually stay there. So we stayed there for a few weeks. And again, I was just transporting 2-3 hours just to get to school. And then we left the Salvation Army and went to an extended stay hotel. And I remember this was in 2016 when we stayed in that extended stay hotel. We stayed in that hotel for a few months, but I remember it was 2016, October, because I remember getting my acceptance to Spelman while I was staying in this extended stay hotel. It was October 6th, 2012. And I remember the date because it was a dinner. I had an early decision. I got accepted early and the food was really, really good. And I just remember that. And I just enjoyed the food so much. And I remember that I didn't know anything about applying to colleges at all. I didn't know about the Common App. I didn't know, like, you're supposed to apply to multiple schools. So Spelman was the only college that I actually applied to. And if I didn't get in, I was out of luck. But thankfully, they let me in. So we stayed there for a few weeks. And then eventually we moved on and we moved forward. And we started staying in this place here in Point South Apartments. Now, this was an interesting place to stay. The very first time we moved in, the very first day we moved in, I remember 12 police cars coming by, going to another neighbor who had murdered someone and who was selling drugs outside of their house. And we stayed there for about a year, but then unfortunately, our house had gotten broken into and my mother no longer felt safe. So our apartment got broken into and my mother no longer felt safe. So we ended up moving to a new place where a house actually, where my mother currently stays, and she's alive and well, and hopefully she continues to stay that way. So all this is around the time I was graduating from high school. So here I'm at Charles High School, where I eventually graduated from valedictorian. And I remember the day before my graduation, we were doing a graduation practice where you practice how you're gonna walk into the stadium. So I had got a phone call and I didn't answer it because I'm trying to focus on graduation. But then I listened to the voicemail and the person there was saying, we're going to give you a full scholarship. And I was like so surprised because I honestly did not know how I was going to pay for the school. It's $40K in tuition every year. And we didn't really have much money for anything, let alone tuition. So I was very grateful that sharing my story and the local newspaper led to me eventually getting the scholarship. So this is me on the day of graduation with my salutatorian here. And my sister and I, like I said, we sort of went to separate schools. And my sister, she went to public school, Atlanta public school. She went to Carver and she actually graduated salutatorian. So she's amazing. She's Chelsea and I am Chelesa. So, and then again, after being on the news and being a part of stories again for graduating and all that. I've met a lot of people, including Marian Wright Edelman. She is a Spelman graduate, and she is also the founder of the Children's Defense Fund. And this was an amazing time to like meet her. And then also, I just got so much outpouring of love and support from so many different people who would send me donations. I got future scholarships going forward. They were smaller, but I got a few scholarships. And I had people who were like, okay, let me donate this to you. And so I was able to actually sort of fill my first dorm room with my bed, that it was like my bed for like the first time in a long time, due to donations from people. This is nothing, this is just chemistry. Uh, I don't think that shows. I've been using this pointer thinking that it points. I guess not. Oh, it's working. This is chemistry. I like chemistry, but this is a museum in London. And I just knew I was going to do chemistry. So I was at Spelman. I had been there for about a year. And I started in August of 2013. So May 2013 came around, and there's this woman here. Let me see if I can. I need to point to her because she's amazing. Okay, this woman here. She was the head of the homeless education department for Clayton County Public Schools. She bought my graduation robe. She bought my class ring. She was just the person who did everything for me. And she told me, she was like, Chelesa, we're gonna establish a scholarship in your honor. And I was like, okay. I was like, I thought she was kidding, but she was serious. She was serious. And so this picture here is the first year of the scholarship being given to students. It's a $1,000 scholarship, and we give it to 2 to 3 students a year, depending on how many applications we get, and then how much in donations we get. And then here, this is I think this is in the 5th year anniversary of giving out the scholarship, but it was started in 2014, and this May made it 10 years of the scholarship. So I'm forever grateful to this woman here. She's amazing for thinking about me and deciding to even do something like that for me. So I went on, did well at Spelman, graduated in 2017. And this is my graduation. And my father here is another reason why I chose to do drug design for psychiatric disorders. My father, unfortunately, uses alcohol, and it would cause him to have some trouble. So my mother left him when we were younger, which is another reason why we were experiencing homelessness. One, my mother had cancer. She couldn't work, so she really couldn't pay rent. So we experienced that homelessness. And then my father was not in the picture because of his alcohol use disorder. Thankfully, he's much better today, and he's around. And I love him. So yeah, so I graduated from Spelman. And this woman here is my godmother, and she was one of the women, she was the director of the Hope Shelter. So even though we were no longer staying in the Hope Shelter, we stayed in contact with her, and she was with us all the time. And she passed away a few years ago, unfortunately, but I will forever remember her for taking care of me during a difficult time. And then after I graduated from Spelman, I went on to the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. So I was actually in NINDS, which stands for National Institutes for Neurological Disorders and Stroke. Unfortunately, I can't share any of my research there because it was all on the federal computer, and I kept the computer there. And I also signed a confidentiality agreement because it was with a company that we're partnering with, where I was testing a few drugs, looking at dopamine receptor signaling. This picture here is actually from Halloween. Since this is November 1st, I was like, I'm going to put this. There's this man who was the emergency manager. He would always wear the exact same outfit every day. So we're like, okay, our lab is going to dress up just like this man. So that's what we did. And this is a program that I was in at the NIH for students who were interested in health disparities. And so we took some pictures. So after graduating from there, after being at the NIH, I started applying to med school or MD PhD programs. I applied to 28 schools. So I was like, nobody's gonna accept me. Oh my gosh, it's so competitive. Thankfully, I got accepted. And I came into Yale. And when I got to Yale, some people from the AJC, which is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, they sort of just wanted to check in on me and see how I was doing after, graduating from high school and college and all of that. And I said, oh, I'm doing great. I'm going to start school at Yale. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. We should do a photo shoot or something. I was like, okay, sure. And we did. And the story sort of blew up. And then some people contacted me. They were like, we want you in our issue of People magazine. And I'm thankful that they also saw something in me. So again, this is my This is me on graduation day getting my white coat, which I probably will not be wearing for another 5 years because I still have so much to do. But I'm forever grateful to the MD PhD program for accepting me and having me here. Okay, that's it about boring stuff about my life. And let's talk about some research. So, first and foremost, we know that cancer is, well, it's really affects people's lives, and especially affecting mine. So cancer is second only to heart disease as a leading cause of death in United States. The number one cause of death from cancer is lung, but then it's prostate for men, and then for women it's breast. Particularly gliomas are a sort of a very aggressive form of cancer, depending on when you are diagnosed. Gliomas are not common primary tumors, but they will metastasize to other parts of the body, or people will get them from metastasis from other parts of the body. So gliomas are going to be classified based on the cell type. For epidermal cells, children and young adults get this, and it has a pretty good survival rate of about 65 to 95%. Pilocytic astrocytoma, again, children and young adults, and they get a very good survival rate of greater than 10 years. Oligodendrogliomas, people get around 40 to 50 years of age, and they're pretty rare, but the survival rate, as you can see, goes down to about 50 to 60%. Then you get diffuse astrocytomas, and people get that between 20 to 40 years of age, and it's incurable, and people only last between 2 to 12 years. Anaplastic astrocytomas, 30 to 50 years of age, incurable again in 18 months to 10 years. And lastly, glioblastoma multiforme is the most aggressive malignant primary brain tumor, and it is at 64 years of age where people get it. And it's also, again, it's incurable. And this picture here is just showing you where areas of the brain where different types of gliomas can come from. And again, sort of our higher grade gliomas come from the midline structure here. So what I study, or what I'm working on, is BK channels. Not BK channels themselves, but developing compounds that interact with BK channels. So BK channels are big potassium channels, and they get their name because the amount of voltage that runs through these channels is between 4 to 500 in comparison to maybe 10 to 30 for other potassium channels. And these channels are composed of 4 alpha subunits, 4 beta subunits, and 1 gamma subunit. Oops, I did not mean to do that. Okay. This diagram here is showing the alpha subunit with the membrane expanding domain, as well as the cytosolic domain. And in this domain is where, after potassium binds to the gate and opens the gate, this is where calcium will come in and do its job. So the 4 alpha subunits will form a tetramer here, and there they're able to form this gating ring that can allow the potassium to come in due to a change in voltage, and therefore lead to the release of calcium. The channels also are rich in gamma subunits and leucine-rich species, and they're located on the extracellular side of the cell. And these channels are essential to cell motility and membrane polarization. So in cancer, there are big K channels in general have 7 different splice variants. This is a normal BK channel with a beta subunit and their alpha subunit with the voltage sensing domain, the potassium core, and the calcium sensing domain. However, there are glioma BK channels. And these BK channels got their name because they were originally discovered in gliomas. And these channels have a 35 amino acid mutation from the other splice variant HBR5, as well as a 36 amino acid mutation, and where there are 3 sites that could be phosphorylated by different kinases. And what has been known is that tumor grades, or the severity of different tumors, show a positive correlation between the BK channel and expression. So the more aggressive the tumor, probably the most likely you'll have more BK channel expression. And the reason is this is because alternative opening and closing of the potassium channels are exploited by this glial cell, and the glial cells will get in and wedge in between healthy tissues to evade new areas of the brain. And all gliomas and other tumors besides GBK or possess GBK variants at both the mRNA or the protein level. And then in general, what we believe is that structural variances between the different subtypes of BK channels may explain why a selective BK channel modulator can be designed to target a specific tumor variants, BKL and GBK. And again, GBK is in several different cancers along with glioma, so breast, colon, stomach, duodenal, liver, lung cells. And this enhanced sensitivity to the cytosolic calcium ion concentrations is due to the splicing of the alpha subunit near the C-terminus. So we're interested in targeting this alpha subunit in order to have an inhibitor that specifically binds to only work on these cancerous cells. So there's also, in addition to the GBK variant, there is a BKL variant, and this is observed in prostate cancer cell lines, and it's able to function in the absence of intracellular calcium, and it has a reduced sensitivity to known BK channel blockers. So several other different types of compounds will have to be developed for this. And the activity of this particular variant is due to it's due to this gamma auxiliary unit that increases the ease of the channel opening. So what I do is study Paxil indole terpenoid. Actually, this did not save because I see these typos here. I'm sorry about that. I don't think it saved well. But our lab studies Paxil indole diterpenoids. And these are sort of these compounds here. So indole, and that's because this ring here is an indole, and then diterpenoids because you have sort of this two-ring structure, two-ring structure bringing it together. Paxil enhances trail-mediated apoptosis of glial cells and selectively inhibits BK channels with an IC50 about 50 nanomolar. So Paxil will promote apoptosis in pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma and malignant gliomas. And we have a few compounds that our lab is currently developing in order to, again, inhibit these channels. So Paxil itself, we had a collaborator at WashU, Christopher Lingle, and he showed using site-directed mutagenesis studies that Paxil will bind to the closed state near the top core of the alpha subunit, and this binding happens in the closed state. And selective action of the GPK and BKL is anticipated due to those structural differences between those variants. So what I'm working on is paspalin. Paspalin is a fungal indole diterpenoid alkaloid natural product. Several of the cancer drugs we have today arose from natural products. It was isolated in 1966 by Fair, Ackland, and Aragoni from the ergo fungus Claviceps paspali, where it got its name. So it's very similar to Paxil with this indole ring and then this diterpenoid core here, or this dicyclic core along with this heterocycle here. So our lab is working in collaboration with Faye Rogers in radiotherapeutics, and she was able to test some compounds from our lab that showed that paspalin selectively inhibits LNCAP cells. So here, this is paspalin A, which is the original structure, and we have 4 different cancer cell lines. ACT is colorectal carcinoma, HeLa is cervical cancer, K562 is lymphoblastic cancer, and then LNCAP is prostate cancer. So here you see that with the original paspalin A structure, the IC50 is between 5 to 15 for each of those cell lines. However, if you break this bond between the indole ring and this 4-membered ring here to produce a hydroxy group and a methyl group, basically that selective inhibition goes away and there is not much of an inhibition at all or a good IC50. However, if you change this proton here to a Talza group, which is a bulkier substituent, you will basically decrease or eliminate all selectivity at the 3 previous cell lines and only have selectivity at the prostate cancer cell line. Which you can see here had an IC50 at 2.26 micromolar. So what I do is I'm in the lab and I do chemistry and I make analogs to this particular compound. So I'm going to try to like just explain this really broad level. So we start off with this commercially available material, which is also just very important in drug development in general, because you want to have cheap things so that when we do eventually, hopefully go into development, it's easy to make. So we start with this, this cheap available material, take a base, and then you add this EVK and acetylate it at this position. From there, you add L-phenylalanine and LCSA and dimethylformamide to create this diketone. And this diketone can be used as a starting material for several different compounds, not just paspalin. It's a very popular starting material. From there, we use a base, potassium terbutoxide, which will extract a proton from here, and which we can alkylate at that site to produce this compound here. From there, we do citric acid along with potassium osmate, dihydrate, NMO, and water and terpenol to create a diol, which then goes on to form this acetal material here. And then from there, we just do a reduction with phenolsilane and iron acetinoate to produce this compound here. So here's just a reduction in this double bond species. And then from there, after creating the reduced acetal, adding lithium, and then several different types of electrophiles, which is what I do, along with potassium and ethanol, produces the compound here. And then again, just doing adding a methyl group will reduce this from the oxidized state to the hydroxyl group and the methyl group. And so I have been developing looking at several different electrophiles, and these electrophiles are all heterocycles. So they're about 2, 3, and 4 substituents away. The N heterocycle is 2, 3, 4 substituents away from the hydroxyl group. And these are pretty simple to make. They're very easy to make. They take 1 hour, and thionyl chloride and DCM as 0 degrees room temperature. And I'm able to place these onto the Pascal molecule. So currently, that's what I do. I am still doing this, and then eventually, hopefully, I'll be going to Faye Rogers' lab to actually do the biological testing with those prostate cancer cell lines, but we also want to test these in those glioma cell lines. And future analogs will be changing the sulfonate moiety and the tosyl moiety. So we can vary the linker here, since it's a bulky group. We want it to continue to be a bulky group because we think that's where it gets its selective inhibition from. So it can be sulfoxide, sulfonamide, amide, carbamate, or carbamide. And then just changing the tosyl moiety, we can do a ring walk, which is basically just taking this methyl group and putting it on various sides of the ring. Introducing an electron poor arene or an electron rich arene, a pyridine, which are the previous compounds that I've made before. I've created pyridines, and then imidazoles to also add here. So these are some references, and these are my acknowledgements. Thank you so much to my PI here in the back, and to the other few people on this list who are bolded, who have helped me with this project and have helped teach me chemistry. So that's it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chelesa. If you have any questions, I see we have some hands raised. You can also put your questions in the chat. Yeah, so Chelesa, are you able to see the participants tab to see who's raised hands? Since you can see both the in-person hands and...
I think so.
Okay,
yes.
So we have, all right. So we have one person who's raised their hand. I'll ask them to unmute. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. Tavis Magruder here. Morehouse class of 2021, and I'm currently in Harlem, New York City. And my question for you is, after spending the past year in direct patient care for me, I've realized a desire for leadership and with greater autonomy. And with your MD PhD training, how do you feel that has trained you to lead in your future career endeavors?
Well, for one thing, I think with the MD PhD, you have to have specialized knowledge. One, you know, both the medical side. So I can go into mostly sort of any talk related to medicine and actually understand the medicine side. And just in general, being a physician, you are expected to be the leader of a team. You are the person who is making all the decisions. I mean, then with the PhD side, you're the leader in your field. You are expected to know your chemistry, know your subject or your target, and then again, present and do PhD level type stuff. So I think that just being in medicine in general, it teaches you how to be a leader because you will be leading, like you will be making important decisions that will change someone's life. And so we're trained very on, it's very emotional, but we're trained very on to do that.
Thank you so much. Yes, you did.
Oh, that is so sweet. I love my Spelman sisters.
I see we have another hand raised. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, hi, my name is Becca. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, Arizona State University. You mentioned that your chemistry teacher was sort of this first representation that you saw of someone who looked like you and that inspired you, or at least empowered you to recognize and realize like your capacity. Um, can you share with us beyond that, especially now in this space that you're in, which has less people who look like you? Have you found mentors both, as representations, but also outside of that? And how have you navigated that space? And thank you for your story. So inspiring.
Oh,
I was a case manager for such a long time, and I had little girls who would have Ubers come pick them up because we also have the same, the federal law where, they can go to school wherever. And so it's just inspiring to see that you made it out.
thank you. So actually, I forgot to also mention that my ninth grade teacher, who's my biology teacher, he was Black as well. So I had two strong Black scientists that, inspired me to go into chemistry. I've definitely found a community here. I am a very big proponent of emailing random people. I will go on the Yale website and I'm like, let me just go to the Department of Neuroscience, Department of Psychiatry, Chemistry, and I will look for the Black faces and I will email them. And they always respond. And I've been able to form a community with those people. And then in general, the collaborator who I'm working with on testing the compounds, Faye Rogers, she's actually a Black woman and she is an associate director of the MD-PhD program, and we have a close relationship. I've cried many times during this journey, just in the MD-PhD, and she's always been someone I could just send a text to and call randomly and she would pick up. She's like my Yale mother. So yeah, I definitely have that support. Oh, yeah, sorry, there's a first question.
Your story is, really inspiring because the amount of strength as a child going through things like that is, I understand that in some way, so I really relate to it, but I think of you and where you are right now, and shout out to Faye, because I do love Faye. I also know Faye, when I came out here, she actually emailed me, because her daughter was in my lab and emailed me and was like, hey, do you want to hang out? So, I understand definitely finding community here, especially in a place where, you're absolutely the minority. One thing I want to ask is, you're a chemist, which is amazing as an MD PhD. You're like, I'm creating different compounds to be able to treat gliomas. For your idea, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Are you going to be like, would you want to be working in a company, both the medical side and the patient side? Where do you see yourself?
Okay, well, in 5 years, I'll probably still be here. I'm just kidding. Hopefully I'll be graduating. But in 5 years, hopefully I'll be in residency, maybe at Yale. I actually want to go into a combined family medicine psychiatry residency. During my clinical time or during my clinical clerkships, I did 3 years of medical school, and I made such a great connection with my patients because a lot of them are, lower income patients and underserved. So I hope to be in a residency, but then also serving those particular type of patients. That'll take me 5, 6 more years. So I'll probably be 40. And at that time, I would like to be in academic medicine, hopefully with some collaborations with pharmaceuticals. Unfortunately, I can still do cancer research. Cancer is probably like the biggest funded research in America. But unfortunately, with psychiatric disorders, I would have to stay in academia because not many drug companies are in it because it's so difficult and it's such a rare, like schizophrenia, it's a very rare disease, and I have 2 family members that have it. So I have to do my own little thing in the lab. Oh, I'm sorry. Her question was, what do I see myself in 5 years?
We have one hand raised here. You can go ahead and unmute.
Good afternoon. My name is Tyra Dennis. I'm a junior honors child development family relations pre-med student at North Carolina A&T. And your story was really inspiring. And just to see a Black face, not Black face, I'm so sorry, a Black person, female at that's doing an MD PhD is just so inspiring on so many different levels for me, being that I am a first-gen student as well. And I just would like to ask you, what advice do you have for anyone that wants to pursue an MD PhD that is a minority?
Don't quit, because we definitely need you. That's probably my biggest piece of advice. Do not quit. And don't be too discouraged. You got to take the MCAT twice. I had to take it twice, and I did really well the second time I took it. Stay very focused in your pre-med classes so that you don't have to do a lot of studying backwards, sort of studying again when you're studying for the MCAT. Ironically, I was so great in chemistry, but I had forgot all my biology by the time I took the MCAT, and it was just, I was like, girl, you're going to med school. But I learned it again. But basically, stay locked in on your courses, remember it, really absorb the information, because you will use it for the MCAT and then eventually into medical school. Then also, if you want to do MD, PhD specifically, try to get as much research as you can. I spent a few years in undergrad. I was at SC Johnson in Cincinnati, and that's another place for undergrad. Find an undergrad institution to go to, especially if you're interested in going to that institution for school, and go there to they have programs specifically for minorities, and do some research. And again, networking is key for anything you do.
Thank you so much.
Right. See if anyone has any message or oh, we see we have a hand raised. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, I was just wondering if I'm also a PhD student, not MD PhD, just normal PhD. And I was wondering if you had any tips for kind of advocating to like PIs about the importance of just like kind of going to conferences that are more geared towards diversity in academia more than just the regular conference that are more specific towards our degrees.
Yeah. But are you here at Yale?
No, I go to USC. I'm in the PhD program for neuroscience.
Okay. I would say actually reach out if you're to encourage if you want to go somewhere that's outside of your field and it's minority focused. If you could get some funding that your PI does not have to pay for from our office in your school, that'd be a great way to say, hey, I want to go out there. I have this funding and I want to present my research there. Unfortunately, it's very, very difficult, I think, to get people who are not of color to understand the importance of us seeing other people that look like us. So you really just have to advocate for yourself, honestly. And I've done it so many times. It's been hard, but the worst I can do is say no, honestly. So just ask, and if you can get some funding from it, or even the conference itself, but from the conference and from the school, they'll probably be more likely to allow you to go to the conference.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll do a last call for questions in the chat, and similarly in person. Does anyone have any remaining questions? Okay, well, Chelesa, thank you for this wonderful, wonderful talk.
Thank you.
We're very grateful to have you. And to everyone in person and online, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please reach out to either Chelesa or to the Black and Neuro team. Be sure to join us on Slack and follow us on social media so that you can stay aware of other seminars that are going on. So thanks again, Chelesa, for this wonderful experience and for sharing your story.
Thank you for
Thank you,
having me.
everyone.